everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our presentation this evening. And with being stuck inside, this is the perfect time to focus on crafting the perfect personal statement for the Common App essay or for a university-specific application. But first, we want to introduce ourselves and tell you why you should listen to our advice and tell you a little bit about our company before we jump into example essays and structuring ideas and, of course, the Q&A section. So my name is Lindsey, and I'm also a counselor here at MoonPrep. I previously worked as a writer and SAT, ACT tutor for the past 5 years. I work one-on-one with students to help them raise their academic profile, but my passion really is helping students create a compelling personal statement and helping them emerge as a stronger writer. And I also do a lot of the writing here at MoonPrep and have interviewed admissions officers at colleges, medical schools, and competitive camps, as well as other leaders in the university and medical school admission industry.
And my name is Michaela, and previously I worked as a staff writer for a national magazine and also as an admissions counselor at a Big Ten university. So I've been right in that seat reading hundreds of these admissions essays, and now I have an author page on niche.com and also spend my time working as an independent counselor at MoonPrep. So MoonPrep is made up of a team of independent college counselors like me and Lindsey, who work with students virtually and guide them not only through the college admissions process, but also through high school as well. The counselors at MoonPrep serve as a guide and a mentor to our students. We help younger students, underclassmen, select the right classes for their major, and also help them narrow down their career interests to help choose that major later on. We also help our students find summer internship opportunities or even internships or those kind of crucial shadowing experiences as well. We really spend our time helping them build the strongest possible applicant profile. So when their senior year rolls around, they are the most competitive candidate for even the most selective university. And with our rising seniors or juniors going into their senior year, we help guide them through college applications so nothing is missed, and also help them brainstorm the perfect college essays based on the hundreds of effective ones that we've seen and helped students write. Essentially, we work with each student in a one-on-one capacity. We don't follow a typical Monday through Friday, 9 through 5 schedule. We work nights, weekends, and in various time zones, really just whenever it's convenient for our students. We really just help fill in that gap that may arise from a really busy high school counselor who might not have time to help with every single one of these items for every student on their list. And also, I haven't met many high school counselors who proofread students' essays on a Saturday night or hop on a Zoom call to help a student submit a college application at 10 p.m. And that's absolutely what we do, and that's where we come in. Our company is really unique because we accept only a limited number of students for each counselor, so we can completely focus on our students' individual needs and even help work with medical school applicants and grad school applications too. And we have a focus on highly selective college admissions and also direct medical programs, which are also called BSMD programs. Our counselors also meet regularly together to share advice about all of our students. So the cool thing is when you work with one of us, you work with all of us.
Yeah, perfect. So let's jump right in. Here we go. And so I already saw a question about how important the personal statement is to the college admissions process, and we're definitely going to dive into that a lot, especially here in the beginning. So many students use the Common App, which serves as a single application that over 850 colleges allow for you to fill out one application for every school that uses it. So saves you a lot of time, means you can apply to more schools a little bit easier. This application includes a 650-word essay called the personal statement, which is what we're focusing on tonight. And in order to get into your dream school, you'll need not only great grades and test scores, but also a strong personal statement. So if you think about it, other students might have very similar GPAs. They might even have a similar SAT or ACT score if the schools are, not test blind. They might have even very similar experiences as you, but the way that you can really shine and showcase your personality is through the personal statement. So making sure you take a lot of care in writing that is essentially why we're here today to help you with. And there are 7 prompts for you to choose from. But luckily, there's that last prompt that allows you to essentially submit an essay on any topic, so you don't ever feel too hedged in by the questions. And luckily, also, these prompts rarely change from year to year, and the admissions committees really have no preference for which prompt you choose. And actually, most students end up choosing that catch-all kind of question at the end, the just tell us about yourself, a prompt of any choice of your choosing. So the prompt does do a holistic, the essay does allow schools to do holistic review of your application because it allows them to see the full picture of who you are. And so this essay is your chance on your application, along with any supplemental essays to show your personality beyond just a resume. And this really isn't the time to simply restate your resume or just casually introduce yourself. This is the time to stand out and let your words create a powerful message of your character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing someone asking about, they have lots of things to talk about, especially for that essay. And so how do I choose one of them to speak about? And I am absolutely going to cover that in a slide in just a little bit. I promise I'm getting there. So basically, after this webinar, not only are the slides and all this entire video going to be available on YouTube for you to access later, if you also find yourself wanting more personalized advice after this, we create a special just for you guys to utilize. I personally, and I know Lindsey too, works with about 10 to 12 seniors each year, in addition to my underclassmen. And every single year, the students that sign up for MoonPrep during the summer before their senior year or earlier, they start immediately working on their Common App activities and their essays. And then they're kind of able to enjoy their senior year a little bit because they have all that stuff out of the way. Then we have a few students join us in October, about 30 days before some of their major deadlines. And they have to start from scratch on those exact same items, but they're just really rushed about it. These students are super stressed. They're juggling their tough senior year classes because, of course, teachers don't give you a break during college application season. And they're also writing all of their essays because there's more than just the Common App essay. And honestly, their essays suffer for it, and then so do their college acceptances. So just don't be them. Contact us after this webinar to craft the perfect personal statement. So we create a little special just for you. It's $199, which is normally a $500 value of 1 hour where we're helping you it's not just 1 hour. It's the first 1 hour call is going to be a brainstorming, going through your entire resume and finding the perfect, really the perfect topic for your Common App, and then helping you write an extended outline so you have paragraphs to expand. And then also we're going to spend time offline over Google Docs, adding in like structuring and editing and ideas about how to reshape, how to guide and shape the structure of your essay. Basically, what I tell my students is getting the story on the page. And then we'll have a final editing session focusing on that, cutting it down to word count and actual sentence structure, kind of like the fine tuning. Then we'll also have another summary Zoom call with finishing touches. So you're getting quite a few hours of work for just $199, which is a steal when you're working with us. So, all right. We want to talk a little bit about, how to actually brainstorm the idea of the Common App or personal statement essay. I'm going to use the Common App and personal statement essays like interchangeably. I'll just use them back and forth. But I wanted to share my process of how I help students brainstorm the perfect essay that they're going to use for the personal statement. And it's almost like working backwards at times, but I promise this process works for me when I'm working with students. So I always tell students to start by writing out a list of all the supplemental essays that you plan to write. So again, like Lindsey said, if you're applying to 10 schools with the Common App, of course, they're going to ask for that personal statement, but a few of the more selective schools will also ask for supplemental essays as well. Things like, how did you choose your major? Describe an activity on your resume in further detail. So just things like that, just write out a list of all of them, and then also write a short outline of which things in your resume you want to cover in those supplemental essays. So if they're asking you, like, how did you choose your major? That's a great place where you can talk about volunteering, your volunteering experience at a local hospital, which led you towards choosing pre-med. Or they might ask you, talk about a time that you demonstrated leadership, which is, again, the perfect time to talk about your role on student council. So since you have those two things kind of out of the way, and they need to be talked about on your supplemental essays, now you know you can't talk about those on your Common App essay, so there's no overlap. So just kind of helps you kind of create a roadmap to your personal statement topic. So again, just like after you have a solid list of which items on your resume you need to talk about in your supplemental essays, then you can start really brainstorming ideas for that Common App essay. And again, essentially, you're just creating a roadmap to the perfect personal statement topic. Now, every student I work with has a few last-minute additions to their college list in the fall, a few schools they want to add last minute, but getting those main supplemental essays planned out will help avoid about 99% of any potential overlap in those essays. The second part of my process is we're going to take that list of supplemental essays again, and we're going to see what items we have left on our resume to talk about. Then we're going to make a list of the Common App essay prompts, and then in outline form, we're going to explain how you'd want to answer each one. So one says, like, what is a thing about you? What is an element about your life that, you know, your application wouldn't be complete unless you talked about it? Well, if family is the most important thing to you, and obviously nothing on your resume is going to point back to family unless maybe you babysat your younger siblings or something like that, then family is something you could talk about in your personal statement. So that's an easy one to talk about. So make an outline of all the different prompts on the Common App essay, and then an outline form, explain how you'd answer each one. This exercise is usually the one that helps my students choose their essay topic, because one will just pop out as like, this is the easiest one to write. I'm just writing a bunch about this. And then that's their essay prompt, and that makes it all easy. Just make sure to choose the prompt that will guide you towards the right kind of self-reflection, and also points to your character, your experiences, and also your accomplishments. The prompt that you choose should allow you to demonstrate your unique perspective on a given topic and allows the reader to learn a lot about you. The trick is to find the thing that you want to talk about, whether it's a personal trait or an item on your resume, and then find a unique way to look at it. For example, I had a student who wanted to convey through his essay that he was resilient and adaptable. That was his goal. He wanted that to just shine off the page, that they're going to understand that he's adaptable in every circumstance. So we talked about how he got that way. We just had a conversation, and it turns out that he felt like he got adaptable because he moved to a new city almost every year for his father's job. And his resume kind of shows him to be, like a jack of all trades and all these different activities because he attended so many schools. So we ended up starting out his essay with saying, it's amazing how small your life can look when it's packed inside moving boxes. So he doesn't just come out and say, I'm resilient and adaptable. He tells that story through a unique perspective, and it starts with the very first sentence. My third step is to just start seeking out a bunch of sample essays to get a feel for how you'd like to format your personal statement. Honestly, I would say read like over 30 of them, like read a bunch of them. You're probably going to read an essay that's going to spark a really big idea for you, one that connects well to one of the moments in your life that left a big, significant impact. I also recommend creating a separate document of every element, every sentence, every formula that you really thought like was effective in those sample essays. You're having a separate document of just everything you liked in all of these different essays. Then you can try to think of ways that you can recreate that formula with elements from your own life and your own personal experiences. You can just kind of like plug them in. And do you mind clicking to the next slide for me? Yeah, perfect. So for example, I just want to leave you with an example here. I had a student a couple years ago who read a sample essay that was written in a way that described his life as a math problem. Like this plus this equals this, but if you add this, you get a completely new equation. I've taken that into my own life practices, knowing that if I add one new element, one new experience, it could change my perspective completely. That was kind of like the theme of this sample essay my student read. So my student really liked this concept, and she took that idea but put her own spin on things. She wrote about how she absolutely loved to bake, but since she was pre-med, she reimagined the elements of baking a cupcake from scratch into a scientific example, talking about how the ingredients reacted to one another in the oven and how she experimented with unique flavors, just like she would experiment in a lab. So again, just write down the things that you see that are really effective and in play in those favorite essays that you're reading, and just see if there's something that you can use in your own life to kind of reimagine that formula on the page.
Perfect. Yes. And so, as you guys might have guessed, writing is more of an art and rather a science. So there are different approaches that work for everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my approach, my process with my students, and you can, see what works best for you as well. Because it definitely is a brainstorming game and figuring out how to come up with that right topic for you. And this is probably one of the biggest troubles that a lot of our students have because, as we kind of already talked about, your grades, your extracurricular activities, and your standardized test scores, they're only going to show just one part of you. This essay is really the only time for the admissions officers to get to know you. And even if it's just for a short period of time, you're really your only chance to come alive off the page. So how are you going to use those 650 words to really show the picture of you? So when I start working with a MoonPrep student, one of the first things that I do is send them some brainstorming questions. So here are just kind of like the beginning, a sample of these. And I'm also going to, at the end of this YouTube video, and as well as like in the follow-up email, if you signed up on Eventbrite, you'll be getting like a follow-up email from us with a link to these resources. But there'll be these brainstorming questions for you in an editable PDF. So you can download it, you can write in it kind of over the course of maybe a couple days, a couple hours, thinking about what makes you unique. Because as you can kind of see, a lot of the times it's just like a regular event in your life. Here's kind of the second half of the brainstorming questions. They don't have to be super monumental. It can be a regular event. And that's kind of where a lot of our students get stuck, is trying to find a worthwhile event, a worthwhile topic. I remember one student was really struggling because she kept saying, but is this the biggest thing that's ever happened to me? Is it the most important thing that's ever happened to me? And you know what? Ultimately, it doesn't matter, because one, the admissions officers aren't looking for the biggest or most important event that's happened to you, but they're looking for something that's personalized to you. So these questions are designed to have you start thinking about what makes you unique. You're thinking about your family, you're thinking about challenges you've overcome, you're thinking about your biggest accomplishments. And a lot of these topics that you're coming up with, kind of like what Michaela is doing with her students, you might be coming up with your supplemental essay topics as well, because a lot of times you talk about community or time you show leadership. So always kind of keeping those in mind too. But my biggest piece of advice too, whenever you do kind of start thinking about your accomplishment, what's make you unique, is not to be too modest. Now, I'm not saying to be overly boastful or arrogant. Tone is very important, but you do want to be using your personal statement to be highlighting your good qualities. And so there definitely is a right way to do this. And so you want to make sure that you're spending time talking about the great things that you've done. So I always tell my students, like, maybe think about what your mom would say if she was talking about her friends and she's like bragging on you. She's really proud of you. She's talking about how great you are. What kinds of things would she be telling them? Now try and, emulate that mom energy and rewrite that story into your own words and make sure that you're telling one concise story of you. Now, if you're really having trouble thinking of things to write about, even after thinking through these brainstorming questions, I always recommend to students try to make a list of 15 to 20 random details about their lives, things that are interesting about you, that make you you. And try to think of some facts that help to describe some part of you that's maybe completely unique from everyone else you know. So I always tell them, like, what do I want the colleges to know about me, and why should they care? So you always are going to be like taking a step further and trying to explain why this is important to you. And being specific here is really going to be key. Like, for example, kind of like what Michaela was saying, you're not going to just say that you're resilient. You want to give them examples. You're not going to just say you're smart and motivated. You want to show them how you're smart and motivated. Like, for example, if you've always loved ping pong, you could talk about how you started a ping pong club at your school, and you could talk about the disaster of like the first meeting and how you had to convince friends to join, but what you learned along the way, and ultimately your impact and growth. And now for my process, once we've done the brainstorming questions, that's when we go to sample essays, kind of similarly to Michaela. It's a little bit difficult for students to switch to like the narrative form of writing, just because it's a lot of the times not how we've been taught to write for English literature and essays for schools. But we want to make sure that we're getting in that mindset of being personable and narrative, definitely a story. And after we've done that, my students and I outline prompt answers. We go through them each one by one and see what topics they might feel are best for them. And like Michaela said, we're always trying to think about supplementals as well and try not to cram every aspect of the student's personality and experiences into one essay. And I saw that that was a question that previously came up about, if I have so many things to talk about, how do I pick just one? That's going to be one of the biggest problems, is making sure that you're not showing 20 different aspects of you in the essay, because you only have 650 words. You want to make sure that you take the time, slow it down, and you're able to fully communicate, who you are in the essay. And luckily at MoonPrep, we have tons of resources available to you to help with not just writing the personal statement, but also the supplemental essays. So at the end of this YouTube video, I'm going to send you guys links to all resources, and as well as I said before, that follow-up email if you signed up on Eventbrite. And if you didn't sign up on Eventbrite, you can email me. I'll put my email and Michaela's email in the chat as well, and make sure you get access to that material. But some of those materials that you'll be sent to is like how to answer the popular supplemental essays, how to write this school essay, why this major, and a lot of the hardest things like how to show and not tell. And so we're going to really get into that later on. But as you can see here, we've got a ton of free resources for you, as well as an essay writing ebook that you can find on our website. So we'll talk about that more at length at the end as well, and I'll make sure you guys get the links to those, as well as any links to our upcoming webinars about college admissions that will be coming up in the next couple of months. But until then, we're going to keep talking about personal statements.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I saw a question come in that says, how in the world can you find a topic that hasn't been done countless times before? And that's what I'm talking about next, is topics to avoid. I saw another topic about how would I be able to convey that I'm really creative in many ways, like art and problem solving. I'm going to show you some sample essays and just a couple slides that'll actually talk about literally like talking about that exact same thing. So I'll address that one in just like a couple slides because I've got some examples. Okay, so how can I find a topic that hasn't done countless times? Thank you so much for your question, and I'm going to talk about that right now. So timely, perfect. Okay, so basically, again, I told you all at the beginning that I was a college admissions counselor, so I was the one reading hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of essays. So I'm going to go through some topics that, just because you all are students or parents of students, you haven't been on the other side of the college reading these essays, and you don't know what everybody else is sending in. So it's not like if the biggest thing that ever happened to you happens to be one of these and you want to think of like a new, fresh angle on it. That's great. I just want to share with you the ones that typically don't come across very well, or honestly, there's just so many of them that it's really hard to stand out, just so you can, the majority of you can avoid them. But of course, like if you're really stuck on one, it's okay. Just try to think of like a different way to find a unique angle on it. So the first one is tragedy. Okay, so this one is a big one. And I want to give an example that hopefully will kind of come across. So a lot of students talk about tragedy. There's typically the death of a grandparent, something like that is always brought up. And honestly, I just want to put this out there. I probably saw a death of a grandparent or some sort of disease or, some sort of cancer or something like that in about 40% of the applications. So how would one stand out when there are so many of those, right? So it's just hard. Honestly, the reason why I tell my students to avoid this topic is just that tragedy is hard to quantify. So if 3 essays come in and one of them is talking about how someone's grandma died of lung cancer, then someone else's essay comes in and they're talking about how their grandfather died, in a war, or maybe, and then the third person comes in and talks about, trying to think of like something else, maybe their dog dying. They're all talking about the same thing. And how do I, as an admissions counselor, pick between all of them? Honestly, by the end of the day, I'm probably so depressed, I'm not picking any of them. I'm picking someone who talked about winning a science camp because I'm just sort of depressed by the end of the day. No, but honestly, like it's hard to quantify between them. Like, how do I say someone's grandma was more important than someone's grandpa or someone's dog? I can't. And so I tend to go with whichever one is written best or maybe not pick anyone. So I just recommend trying to avoid that as much as you can. Just try not to go towards, you can go for empathy, but try to never let your essay go into kind of creating pity or oh, this is so sad, this thing happened to me, and then leave it like that. There's no uplifting side to it. I hope that made sense. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is winning the big game. There are so many essays that come in that is my soccer team worked really hard all year, and then we went to the state championships, and that entire night we celebrated with ice cream sundaes. And it's just, again, there's so many of those essays that come in that it's hard to stand out. And also, they don't necessarily compare to deeper topics. So again, imagine reading someone's grandpa dying, someone's grandma dying, and then I won a soccer game. It just doesn't have the same depth. And so it kind of seems to fall a little bit flat. And again, remember that college admissions counselors are reading, 50 of these a day. So how would one about a soccer team stand out that much? Does that kind of make sense? I hope that's making sense. In similar lines is injuries. So I see a lot of essays being written about injuries. I hope you can hear me okay. My thing is being a little funny. So injuries are very similar to winning the big game. They also just tend to not necessarily compare favorably to those deeper topics. Usually this is I injured myself during a high school sport, and then I spent the season on the bench and kind of rehabbing my leg. And then I did a lot of, personal therapy or physical therapy, and I helped my team in other ways. And then they won a big game without me, and I learned to have patience. And that's fine. There's just a lot of those, if that makes sense. And also, it usually doesn't compare to people going to deeper topics. They get to know your character a little bit more. And then I also recommend kind of staying away as much as possible from politics and religion. It's just is kind of one of those age-old things that as soon as you state an opinion about these are topics that everybody says, avoid them at holidays. As soon as you kind of state an opinion about politics or religion, especially these days, you've kind of immediately alienated half your audience. You never know who's reading your essay. So I just recommend staying away from them altogether and never assuming anyone reading your essay has the same point of view than you have. Even if you think, it's like fact, just try to avoid it altogether so that you don't run into any problems, basically. And then also, I highly recommend staying away from talking about your major, like why'd you pick that major or why'd you pick that college? Because a lot of times colleges will have this as a supplemental essay, like why did you choose this major? Why did you choose this college? And so then you've already used up those topics. And also, that's kind of creating the topic to be more about the college than it is about you. If there's something where like, your father went there and now you're estranged and you want to go back, you want to attend that college because you want to have something in common with him. And, like that's the one thing you all have bonded over. Like that might be a unique take on it. But just try to make it as much about yourself as possible and talking about like why'd you choose the fact that you want to go into pre-med at this college because it's so prestigious just isn't focusing on you enough. Okay, so I think I'm ready for the next slide, which is talking about hooks. This is talking about why you should start your essay off on like a good note. So I saw a question come in that's asking about how should a personal statement be structured? And here's your answer. You need to have a hook, which actually grabs someone's attention. And the difference is here, like, honestly, so many personal statements come in and they just read like an extended resume. Like they say, my name is Michaela. And for 12 years, I've taught piano lessons to young students. And they just kind of go into descriptions on like how I began piano and why I started, teaching lessons, and they don't really get deeper. So you can start off with a hook instead to capture people's attention. And it says something like, when my fingertips touch ivory, I feel more at home than when I walk in my front door. Like that sounds interesting. You're like ivory, where is she touching ivory? Oh, piano keys, and you can explain that. So like just grab them with a hook, something interesting right away, which of course we have examples on next. But then next in the structure of your essay, I highly recommend doing like a line, which is just basically the body of your essay, but it's following in line. It's creating a story. You're following a journey to your sinker, which is a really good kind of closing paragraph that somehow ties into your original paragraph, your hook in some way. If you can kind of do a hook, line, and sinker, then you have a slam dunk essay. They all tie in together. It's really easy. It's a win-win for everyone. It's a relief for that admissions counselor to award you an acceptance letter. So let's talk about some hooks, some ideas of hooks, and just like how students have done this in the past. And they can be quotes, they can be just interesting sentences, it can be anything. So one of them, and these are all from essays that I've helped students write in the past. They're just like in the past couple of years, these have been used on personal statements. So one of them is, they say laughter is the best medicine. So this was about a pre-med student who enjoys writing stand-up comedy on the side. It just fits in perfectly, and it's funny right off the bat, and it's just like a sweet little way to start that essay. Then there's one about, you never know where a simple idea might take you. This is describing a student's, like the most inspiring business model that a student has ever seen. And it was like a local business. And then they also were describing their own plan, like how they kind of followed that same model to open their own business while they were in high school. Then there's beating the odds is quite literally in my blood. This is about a girl who's talking about how she kind of inherited an autoimmune disease from her father. And because his disease was kind of like more debilitating, she kind of like had to step up and work 2 jobs to kind of help pay their family, kind of like pay rent and things like that. But her essay was just kind of based around showing how she will do anything to help her family and will face a challenge head on. And so that essay, like that hook was like really reminiscent of the rest of her essay. It's like she's going to just face challenges head on. She's beating the odds no matter what. And then the last one, I really like this one. My hands shook as I discovered my mistake. And, you read that and you're like, oh my goodness, like what happened? Are we reading a crime thriller? And it's just about a girl who made a mistake in a lab, and it led her to discover a brand new antibiotic at a summer camp. So again, you'd never realize that from the hook. It's like surprising. And then she goes on to explain, and your heart is still kind of racing from whatever her hook was. So I highly recommend kind of thinking of a really interesting way to introduce your essay. Is there like a twist or an interesting way that I can come at this topic and kind of surprise someone with my opening sentence? I promise you, it really gets you far to do something out of the ordinary to admissions counselors, because we read so many things that sound exactly the same. So yours will stand out in the best way. You can surprise us in some way. Okay. So before we so we're going to talk about, again, like your essay is really your only chance to show your personality. So just make sure by the end of it that it's saying everything it should. You have your resume that's talking about your extracurriculars, but your essay is the only time they get to meet you through your voice. So just make sure by the end that if you walked up to someone in a store and they read your essay, that they would like you at the end. Like, can we hang out? And I'm going to hand you my essay. Just make sure that it says everything that you want it to say about your character. Okay, I think the next slide is a little reminder about the perfect about the special. So just before we dive into some sample essays, I just want to remind you that you absolutely do not have to be alone in writing your personal statement. It can be so daunting to get started. Like, I'm talking about all these hooks and you have no idea like where to start yours. We completely understand that, and we're here for you. So we can help brainstorm the perfect essay to say everything you want to convey. So I just want to make sure that you saw this special again and knew that you have someone at your disposal that you can reach out to. And we're here for you, in your corner, helping you every step of the way. All right, Lindsay, you want to share one of your sample essays?
Before we do that, do you want to do a little Q&A so we can answer some of these questions that have come in? Let's see.
Sure.
So I'll answer one that's kind of relevant to what we were just talking about. For a hook, do you recommend us starting right in the action or starting by taking a bit of time to explain the context? And just to reiterate what Michaela has been saying this whole time, we love it when you just throw us right in the action. Mm-hmm. We like to be a little confused, to kind of, not the whole essay, but the first couple lines being like, what's going on? What's happening? Mm-hmm. So you'll explain the context later in like maybe the second paragraph or even this later half of that first paragraph, but it's okay if at first we're kind of like, what's going on? So totally fine if we're kind of confused in the beginning.
Yeah, and I would say too, I know that Lindsay, you're probably looking for another question, so I'll kind of jump in there. So here's what I tell my students. You don't have to follow this exact formula every single time, but if it does somehow work for your storytelling purposes, here's what you can do. Like, I always tell students to zoom in the lens. So you are looking in on a detail of some kind. Someone said earlier, how do I start? How do I convey that I'm creative? Okay, so zoom in that lens. Say something like, in the hands of a toddler, a crayon or a pen can be destructive. In my hands, a few brush strokes or a few pen strokes can, turn into the face of a king or something like that, where you're like describing something you're creating. And then zoom out the lens and explain maybe how you creatively problem solve. You can talk about how, I don't know. I don't know much about your resume, but maybe how you started doing doodles for a local newspaper or something like that. You're creative problem solving by adding things to your resume, but it's also like you're being published. You can just zoom out the lens a little bit to explain what's happening in those first couple lines, and then you can zoom out the lens even further and talk about your character and your future and things like that. So that is one way to start your essay in the action, is just zoom in the lens, describe something, zoom out, describe it, zoom out, talk about yourself.
Yes. Perfect. Okay, we had a request about a small neurological disorder that you work through and grew from. Would that be looked at like a sob story? I mean, it's so hard to answer these questions too, because we're just getting like a tiny little picture of you. So it really ultimately depends on what you make of it. You could make it into a sob story, or you could really be showing us the growth. A lot of these questions are kind of asking about like, is this an okay topic? If it's something that, you obviously has affected you a lot, then, and it's been like a challenge that you've had to overcome, it's okay to talk about it as long as 80% to 90% is talking about the growth. Talking about what you've been able to accomplish because of this. You're not focusing just on this disorder that maybe was, obviously affected your life greatly. But to say that if it's a good topic or not, it's hard to say. So I think it all is about what you make of it and what you say.
Yeah, and you could like thread it into other things. You could be talking about other, like, it doesn't just like, don't have it be like the focus. Just like, almost like throw it in there. Like, oh, and also I had this, but you're really talking about something else. And it just like kind of creates, have it be another layer to your story and not the topic of your story. And then that helps. I'm telling you, I've read so many essays where they're just like talking about something separate, and then they throw in something like, also I'm in a wheelchair, and then they talk about something else completely, and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? And it's surprising and it's nice. So like a tragedy can be absolutely talked about. Just don't have it be. There was another one about talking about severe bullying. Again, just like have it be uplifting. The problem with the tragedy ones, when I talked about it, is just that that's all it talks about, is just like, this horrible thing happened. My life is awful. It's been a struggle, and then it ends. And you're like, okay. I mean, I don't know what to do about that. Yeah. I'm sorry, but like, I can't even talk to you, so just have it be uplifting. Like, what did you learn? Where did you go? Okay, so you survived some severe bullying. Did you start an online like platform? Did you do something with it? That's what they want to see. It's like, what did you do with that?
Yeah, and we're seeing some comments too, questions about like, is LGBTQ plus like a legitimate topic? What about sexism and gender like stereotypes? The most important thing too to remember here is like, it's ultimately your essay. And so of course, like, you might be really passionate about like the gender stereotypes or gender roles or something like that, or being part of like the LGBTQ community. But like, ultimately we want to see how you are interacting with this thing. It's about you, not something else. And so keep that in mind. You really want to be showing like something that has like a lot of impact, a lot of on yourself and maybe others. We want to be able to get insight into you, not just how you feel about certain issues. So ultimately, there's sometimes you can like talk about something you're passionate about in supplementals. That might be a better topic if you're just talking about like, gender roles in general. But that being said, like, maybe you're like the president of like your club in school that is like about LGBTQ alliances, or you've done talks in front of people, or you have different activities you can talk about, different steps you've taken, different actionable things you can actually prove. It's not just a one note essay. You want to be showing different dimensions of you as well.
And I've seen ones like that come through that were incredible, incredible essays. I guess I was referring to ones, I guess I was thinking more like politics, and just ones that come across that just like rants about different things. And it's just like 650 words of just like yelling at a screen. It's like, just talk about yourself, talk about, your own like layers as a human being, and come at it from an interesting perspective, and just don't let it be something that again, if you just gave it to some, like literally look at it like you are giving it to someone on the street. You don't know who is on the other side reading it. So how would you feel walking up to with your essay, giving it to someone you've never seen before on a street? Look at it like that, and it'll help shape your scope, your perspective on your essay a lot.
For sure. Okay, and then I see another one about, this is a great one. Like, what if the only thing I'm really interested in is an academic subject and I spend my high school year studying the subject, all my extracurriculars are similar? That sounds like actually it would be a great topic because it would weave together really nicely.
Yeah.
We'd form a great cohesive thing, or great cohesive picture of you. But also, that being said, Michaela talked about this earlier. You don't want it to be reading off as a resume that, you saying you're super passionate about biology. You've done research in a lab for 3 years and you did, I can't even think of what else you could do with biology, but things like that. We want to be hearing a story and what kind of things it says about you. Because you're much more than just like that one interest in the topic. We want to be able to see a little bit more about you from your essays as well. So that being said, writing about that one academic subject's fine, but making sure also that if it is something related to your major, maybe thinking, maybe I should say this for supplemental, talk about maybe my volunteer work that I've done, or the fact that I do like a cooking competition with my cousins. It doesn't have to be something school related. It doesn't have to be something extracurricular related. It can be kind of anything you might want. And in our examples later too, you'll see some examples of things that aren't necessarily extracurricular related, but it shows those positive characteristics that you want to show to schools. Okay, you want to do another one, Michaela?
Another question? Yeah.
Do you have a fancy?
I saw one that was, what about talking about your failures as a theme? I would say I've seen this done once where it was like kind of turning it into like kind of a funny thing. Like, I can, most people can, count on one hand the number of times they've done blank. For me, it's been countless, like kind of turning into like a funny thing. And then you can get more serious, like have like kind of a series of them. But for the most part, I recommend just trying to stay as positive as possible, just because, again, there's so many of them that are not listening to this webinar that don't know. There's so many that come through that are kind of like focused on tragedy. So just try to make it as positive or funny as possible, and then you could. But I just recommend, is it better to look at it in a comedic or a motivational movie type way? Well, the person reading the essay on the other side probably doesn't, like, if they want to see your journey, they don't need to be motivated. So if you can talk about how you were uplifted and like there was a moment in time that made you change your perspective or your mind on something, and then you grew as a person, your character developed because of it, talk about that and how you were motivated. But I've seen a lot that was like, live every day to the fullest, like trying to tell the person reading it. And that seems to fall flat. I've never seen that done like effectively. So just be wary of that, basically.
Yeah. I see a question too that I think could kind of apply to everyone too, about how much is the essay considered compared to scores. So schools, no matter which school, they're going to be looking at your GPA. That's going to be one of the biggest things they look at. They're going to be looking at your test scores. That's another like big thing that they're looking at. They're looking at your, SAT subject tests, your AP scores. They're looking at those things too. But the way that they can really distinguish you is through like something that like a lot of colleges will call like positive characteristics. There was like a survey done by a lot of the different schools, and one of the like top 5 things that they considered along with the scores was something called positive characteristics. So thinking about what characteristics you're trying to show the schools. You have like if you're a waiter, you only have like a small plate that you could be carrying. Think about what you're putting on your plate to give to the universities. If you are showing off, like kind of what we talked about, those like negative things from the start, that's taking up a spot that something positive could be having. But it all depends on, what you might be talking about later. But that being said, essay is still pretty important. It's never going to be more important than your GPA. But if you're kind of like a weaker GPA student, I think that a really strong essay could help put you over the edge. If you're like a bubble student, having a great essay could be the reason why you get in, because it's showing why you are the right student for the job, or for the position in the school over another student who might be just as, bubble student as you. Oh my goodness, we have so many questions, so we might not have time to get to them all, but we will definitely try.
Why don't while you get to your sample essay,
Okay.
I will answer one more really quickly, and then we're going to do sample essays. We're going to finish the webinar, and then we'll stay on for a few minutes and answer your questions if you guys want to stay on, okay? Yeah. So we'll just stay on for 15 extra minutes or whatever and answer a few more of your questions, because of course we want to interact with you, and we just don't want to like have other people miss out on some content, from our slides. But one of them said, okay, there we go, almost.
I know. They go
oh my gosh, there's lots of more came in and then it like jumped down. Okay, so how many months do you suggest that we spend on our essays? For example, I'm applying to a school early decision, so I need to finish it by November. Yeah, log off this webinar and get started. Like, you're done, get started. I have my students have been working on their essays for months already. So get started on them tonight. Start reading sample essays to get to work. So honestly, if you're applying early decision, which of course we've covered in other webinars, you're welcome to go on our webpage and go read or watch other webinars where we talk about like application season and deadlines. Yeah, get started on them immediately so you have time to like reflect and edit and write any other supplemental essays too. So get going, get started.
Yeah, and I'm going to answer one last one because I see it come in twice about SATs and subject tests being canceled. So the important thing to remember about those is a lot of schools are going test optional, but test optional does not mean test blind. And so if you're still submitting your SAT scores or your ACT scores, the schools are still going to be looking at them. It's still going to be something they consider. The only way they wouldn't be considering if they're called test blind, and a lot of schools aren't going that route, at least not yet. I think like the UCs will be test blind in like 2024, but as of right now, they're still test optional. So that's kind of something that you guys should be thinking about, is if you still have like your SAT score or ACT score and it's like a above average for the school, you should definitely still be submitting it with your application. If it's not on the average, maybe it's better not to submit it, but that's ultimately a personal decision. So of course, though, if you don't submit it, then other things will be weighed a little bit more heavily. Strength of curriculum, your grades, all those kind of things are still going to be, weighed a little bit more, as well as your personal statement. So just something to think about. But anyway, I digress. So let's go into some examples, and hopefully this will help like spark some inspiration in your guys' brains and help you kind of really see the narrative form that we're talking about. So this first one, I'll read it off to you guys and kind of talk about it as well. So the first board game I ever played was Disney Princess Monopoly against my mother. It was a shocking experience. My otherwise loving and compassionate mother played to win. Though she patiently explained her strategies throughout the game, she refused to show me any mercy. Over the years, she continued to beat me in both games, but the contest became more competitive and my losses more narrow. So you can kind of see from this opening paragraph, the hook. We're kind of instantly interested in Disney Princess Monopoly, kind of makes us giggle a little bit in our heads, maybe thinking about it. And the fact that, her loving mom is just like demolishing this 6-year-old and like making her cry. That's what kind of the first paragraph. I had to condense it a little bit for this, but there's tears in this opening paragraph in the full-length essay. But we go on.
Yeah, the hook is definitely like, it was a shocking experience. Like that's funny. It's
exactly.
Good.
It's pretty good. So then the second paragraph goes on to say, this past summer, I interned at the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. Working there was certainly not a game, but my strategy was the same. Work hard, remain focused, and deal with the inevitable curveballs. I carefully reviewed red lines on my writing assignments, try not to get discouraged, and responded to the comments to present the material more efficiently. Through the Parkinson's patients, I discovered what it really means to fight to win. I've also come to understand that sometimes a game never ends, but transforms, causing goals to shift that may require an adjustment in strategy. So here, another great example of how she's connecting two seemingly unrelated things. Disney Princess Monopoly and Parkinson's research, her work at the foundation. So unrelated, but she connects them, showing that these skills that she learned playing games with her mom have now correlated later on. So that's basically what you want to do. You want to talk about how you learn them and then talk about how you put them in action in other portions of your life as well. And now for the end, we cut out quite a few paragraphs. My mother and I still regularly play games, and we play to win. However, the match is now more balanced, and I've noticed my mother paying much more attention to my moves and habits, and even learning a few things from me. So this one, full circle, kind of what we've talked about before about the structure of the essay. You want to be bringing it back to what you talked about in the beginning. And she does that perfectly here. And we kind of see the evolution too. It's not just her always losing, her never learning. Both of them are actually learning and, excelling at these games. So this is, I think a really great example just because it adds a little bit of humor. And you wouldn't think that Disney Princess Monopoly would have taught a student anything, but obviously it's given her a lot of really great qualities. And so in the actual full-length essay, she goes on and kind of talks about how these skills infiltrate into other areas of her life in a positive way. So what started off maybe, I guess you could maybe call it negative, but there was tears, competitive moms, like destroying 6-year-old, but it definitely had that happy kind of feeling throughout because she's growing, she's evolving, and she's learning. But that's one of my favorite sample essays.
Love it. All right, let's jump into one of mine. I got two, guys. I'll never leave you without examples. So I got two. I example my students to death. Okay, so this is one that's a very simple concept, but it's perfect for that student who was just asked about how do I creatively talk about something? How do I weave something in, like being really into art, things like that. Or someone else said, if I'm pre-med, but I'm interested in music, here's a really good idea for you, how to weave this in. Okay, so colorful red thread intricately laces together a denim square and a flag patterned remnant of a sweatshirt once owned by my brother. It's kind of a long starting sentence, but that's okay. Slowly but surely, each square meeting one another transforms into a stunning patchwork quilt beneath my careful fingers. So really just painting a picture here, really like just describing what's happening. So this one's really condensed down, just so you know. All right, next slide. Sorry, it's like, okay, there we go. What began as a simple 4-H project has become a passion for quilting to teach others to honor our military veterans. Over 50 youth have attended the small workshops I host to educate others on honoring our military veterans and teaching them to sew quilts of valor, the only recognized award a civilian can bestow a military service member or veteran. The effort I put into teaching reminds me that true leadership is not about promoting myself. Instead, it's about using my abilities to teach others and express gratitude. Okay, it's pretty self-explanatory. My final quilt, so she's graduating, obviously. My final quilt sits folded on a chair. In the construction of this particular quilt of valor, I guided 8 youth in the construction of the folded work of art. Together, we are simply small pieces connected by a thread of community, patriotism, and gratitude, working together to leave the world a kinder place. So it's just talking about how together the people that she's teaching are like bound together by this thread. It's talking about one of the things on her resume that she's been doing these workshops forever. It just like has a way of like threading everything through, pun intended, threading everything through. So it's just a sweet little story about how she teaches and like something that she started as just like a random project turned into kind of a passion thing. And this person actually was going into education, so she talked about like how it kind of also sparked her love of education. So all right, number 2, the next one. It's all right, it's like delays for a second. Okay, so here's a really good one. This is another good one for the student who was talking about music, maybe like how to thread music through. Sometimes the greatest creativity can come from a single impulse. The moment my fingertips touched the strings of a violin, the vibrations beneath the strings begged me to create my own notes. And I tried the guitar next. I missed. It says I could try to the guitar next. Sorry, guys. I was like shortening it. Although fashioned with familiar strings, I felt more detached from the music and found myself creating new music less and less with her doing the guitar. So less of a hook here, but still like an interesting way of talking about how the guitar was similarly fashioned with strings to the violin. This was much more like long in the original one. Okay. Next. Okay, my struggle to play the guitar led me to believe that music would be my only creative contribution to the world until I walked by room W113. There's a hallway at my school that the popular kids avoid. This hallway contains the entrance to the band room, the photography studio, and room W113. One day I stepped foot inside the loud chaos I'd always heard echo through the hallway to discover a world of layouts and designs. Journalism, it seemed, had been calling to me down a hallway. Again, just like a really pretty like imagery here going on, and also that like heart-wrenching like moment where she says, you know, her music would be her only creative outlet to the world. That's so sweet. And then I started with basic designs on design and cameras, but rapidly picked up these skills. After a hand-drawn illustration went viral, I became the go-to artist on staff and began contributing to my local newspaper as well. Without stumbling into W113, I would never have realized my creative potential and the depths of success hidden beneath my own hands. So she ties that back into talking about how beneath her hands music was first formed. It's just kind of like a beautiful like kind of symmetry throughout the whole thing, and also just talking about creativity, but throughout two different things, talking about violin, guitar, music, obviously, but then also journalism, and then how far that took her in life. She's now published in her local newspaper. It's just kind of a sweet thing that also talks about a lot of her different passions at once. Alrighty. So lastly, we just wanted to leave you with a few ways to contact our company for individualized advice, and also offer a few of our free resources while we start our Q&A session, which I know like we just ended, so we're going to answer some questions. So on the screen is our email address and also a link to our resources page. If you go to moonprep.com/resources, we'll have ebooks and worksheets on almost every subject you can imagine, even one specifically about writing the personal statement. And if you're interested in talking to one of us, you can literally ask for one of us specifically if you want to. You can schedule a free call on the website directly to learn more. And that's right on your screen. We also publish a monthly newsletter, so all of our followers have the latest college admissions news too. We put news together every single month, so you're up to date on everything without having to search in multiple places. We have it all ready to go for you. So you're welcome just to stay in the loop that way. And again, you can sign up on our blog page on our website. So again, the website's right there on your screen, as well as a little reminder of our special if you want to talk to us after this. And then I know, Lindsay, I know you popped the little, the brainstorming questions and also the links to everything, because you're amazing and you're this
and I'll
perfect.
send them all out in email as well, so you don't have to worry about saving them. But they're there for you guys there in the email. It'll be coming, and it'll have a link to this so you can come back and like revisit our ideas. But we know we kept you an hour, but we'll still answer some questions. So if your question hasn't been answered and it's been like buried in the chat, feel free to resend it to us, and we'll go through and answer them now. But we have this first one. Should a story make up most of your essay? How are you supposed to include any necessary general details if the story takes up close to all of the essay? So as you might have seen from our examples, there is, it's not just one story that you're telling. You definitely want to incorporate multiple elements of your personality. As we kind of talked about, the food tray that you're bringing around, you want to make sure that you can put as many different things on there. You're not just telling one story in one static moment, you're probably going to be incorporating a lot of different elements because you want to be showing your different good qualities. So that is something to kind of think about as you're going along. One story likely won't make up your whole essay, just one paragraph. And then as Michaela was talking about, you're going to be pulling back, explaining the context, pulling back, further explaining the context. It's not going to just be likely one element there.
Yeah. And also I was going to say, there's one that says, is it okay to talk about my art YouTube channel? And that a famous artist it says it's subscribed to it. Oh, sorry. So I would say, I think it's great that you started your art YouTube channel. I would start off with something like interesting, like you never know, when a viral post, like, how that will affect your life or something like that. And then like break into like how you decided to start this YouTube channel. And then like maybe you could casually reference someone that follows you, but I wouldn't put that as like your main thing. And also if you can like relate that to something else, that'd be great too. So like this YouTube channel was born out of something else that was like bigger in your life too. I just want to make that the focus. If you're applying to like just like a state university down the block or something that isn't super selective, then that might be just like a fine personal statement, honestly. But if you're applying to some school, like I'm talking like a rolling admission, like public state university, it might be a fine topic. But if you're applying to like a selective university, UNC, something like that, I would highly recommend like kind of focusing on something a little more deeper, and then that be the reason, like that's why you started a YouTube channel. That was your outlet for the other thing you're talking about. And then like kind of maybe ending it with, and now a famous person follows me too. Like, like kind of a nice uplifting end maybe.
Yeah.
I hope that was helpful.
Agreed. Perfect. All right, next one. Does the personal statement have to relate to my extracurriculars? My topic seems completely different to what my resume says. And honestly, I think that's totally fine too, because we're showing a whole different side of you. Like for example, I had a pre-med, like a direct medical student who had like great extracurriculars. He started, clubs. He did a lot of research, lots of medicine related extracurriculars. But what he wrote his essay on was like a cooking competition he had with his cousins that I talked about earlier. So nothing to do with medicine, but it was like important because it showed off like his flexibilities, ingenuity. He always lost, but that was also kind of the fun of it because he was like always willing to try again. So it doesn't necessarily have to relate to your extracurriculars as long as it's showcasing a good side of you, a positive quality that you want to show.
And I saw one that said, what if I accord 1 year in middle school to help a disabled student in his studying and exams? Is that intriguing or one of those to avoid essays, do you think? Okay, so honestly, I would say like you can talk about that, but then like talk about that as like your start. There's your beginning, like, and then talk about like that moment, that experience helped me develop a heart for service. And here is how I have continued that in other ways as well. So like, because that's something in middle school that's not like as current as they kind of want to hear about. So the story is great. We just want something a little bit more like recent too, frequent. Yeah. I wasn't frequent. Sorry, guys. And so we just want to like kind of refresh that a little bit. So here's how I developed a heart of service from that moment. And here's how I've continued that. Here's how I plan to continue that on your campus. Done. Then you're good.
Yeah. And there was one a while ago that was asking if you should write multiple personal statements for more than one school, or not. Yeah. If you're applying to like a Harvard and an MIT and the UCLA and Duke and UGA and Emory, like all of those obviously have different goals and they're all different, very different universities. They all value different things in their students. But you don't need to be writing one personal statement for each school because ultimately a personal statement is showing you why you are a good person, why you're empathetic, why you are a go-getter, why you're flexible, why you're adaptable. Like, all those different qualities that you might be showing, all of those are going to be attractive to the schools. And you'll have your school-specific supplemental essays to expand specifically and like go into more of those qualities that they might want at the specific university. So definitely don't make yourself go too crazy by writing a ton of personal statement drafts.
And I'm reading one. My current drafts aren't related to my extracurriculars, but I wanted to tie into how my stories lesson connects to how I change as a person and how I use the lesson I learned in some of my ECs. That is perfect. Okay, so I have a student right now who he was like in robotics. He was in he did like a mission trip where he was working on like prosthetic limbs. And so what he's talking about is I don't know if he's decided on like what he's doing for his actual topic yet, but where he's coming into it later is, okay, so then during COVID, my dad's a dentist and their medical supplier ran out of those dental shields that they need to continue doing like surgeries, things like that. They're essential jobs. And so I used all my background in 3D printing and designing, and I just made them for all the dentists that needed them that all had that medical supplier. So he's using his experience gained from all of his extracurriculars to fix a problem. So that's exactly like, the story's lesson, how you used it, learned it from an extracurricular and then like tying in that lesson. That's exactly do it. That's perfect. Yeah. We love tying in. If you can tie in anything, any little threads, like we love that. That's something that's like, if you can tie in things and show that you're a deep person and that you're really like introspective and you have common themes about your life, like that is our like, that's chocolate to us. So, like, keep it coming. Yeah.
Perfect. I see another one too, kind of about relating things. Art. How can I write about my art related to medicine? I raise money through my art for Doctors Without Borders. I'm majoring in nursing and took health classes, but I'm known for my artistic skills. So, I mean, it sounds like you already have the great hook or the great connection. You're raising money through the art for Doctors Without Borders. Like you've already kind of made that connection. That's a great way to do it. And actually, I had a student last year do a very similar essay. Hers was about her painting with her love for dentistry. So she talked about how she expressed her creativity. And she's like, it might not seem like it, but to me, dentistry is a way to express creativity. Like I don't know quite the technical terms, but like, the paintings that they have to do, the tooth drawings, I don't really know. It was really beautifully written, but she kind of connected those together, talking about how she expresses her creativity. So it could be kind of a similar thing for you too. And you already are doing something that connects those two really perfectly. So I think that would be a great topic. Kind of thinking about why you maybe do those kind of things. Why, like what more about the artistic ability? Of course, it has to be more than just that link between art and Doctors Without Borders. But since we don't quite know your full resume, but I'm sure you've done maybe other things with art, other things kind of with that healthcare career path. So start thinking about that and how more ways you might be able to connect these two. A couple more ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say there's a couple other people that were asking, I'm blanking on like what the actual questions were, but I had a student last year who, I mean, her essay topic, her personal statement was so far off of her major and so far off of her resume, I can't even tell you. Like it was just completely off. And she got into one of the selective programs in the country. Like they only take 6 students. So I mean, you do not have to just like look down at your resume and be like, oh, when I was talking about like writing out a list of all of your supplemental essays, it's making sure you don't like have overlap. You're not talking about the same thing over and over again, but you don't have to stick with your resume at all. Oh yeah, perfect. Oh, yeah. Yep, I'm going to talk about that one next. I got it.
I felt like it was a good leeway to do it.
This is going to be in the same line. Yeah. So my student, she talked about how when her dad took a job overseas and her mom had an extremely busy job and her brother went off to like college, but she had younger siblings too. And she talked about how like suddenly she went from like all she had to do all day was get good grades And then she kind of had to like start running the household. Like she talked about in her essay, her dad was just gone. It like, it wasn't a divorce or anything like that, but he was gone for multiple years. And it was like right in the formative, like she was like a freshman or a sophomore in high school. And so suddenly she was like directing a plumber because her mom wasn't home yet. And then she was also like picking out paint colors because her mom hadn't like gotten home in time to like choose between 3 paints for like their living room. And so suddenly she was like literally running a household with younger siblings. And then she talked about how that translated into her extracurriculars. Suddenly she was like, a quiet academic person was finally like okay with taking some leadership in student council. She was like taking on leadership roles at school. And like her program that she was going into was neuroscience, had nothing to do with her essay at all. It just was like showing her character and like leadership and how she developed as just like a cool person. And now she has the confidence to go into a really selective program like that. So like you do not have to like, you're not like married to your resume and talking about your extracurriculars like at all. I guess she did, but it was leadership and not like that wasn't the focus of it. But okay, if you don't write about a major as your personal statement, doesn't that decrease your chances of getting your major? Absolutely not. That's not, no. You can talk about anything. I've seen people at the end, like, I'm trying to remember, there was an essay that I used as an example in another webinar that was talking about a girl who said she took up knitting to connect with her grandma in her grandma's last years. And then when her grandma passed away, she continued knitting to kind of like help remember her for like the nostalgia. And then she started kind of like doing knitting classes for other elderly patients at like a nursing home. And then she's also started like knitting small bunnies and bears for a foster home facility nearby. And then at the end, she goes, I plan it like as I intend to pursue education. I'm trying to remember what it says. As I intend to pursue education, I plan to connect with people in unique ways, just like knitting helped me connect to my grandmother. So she mentions her major, but it is not all about that. It's like, here's something about myself. I'm like expanding my worldview. I'm expanding who I am as a person, and then just ties in to my major in just like a beautiful ending way. So you can mention your major, but you don't have to. If there's a really cool tie-in like that, then like use it, obviously, because we love that stuff. But no, that does not, like, you don't have to talk about your major in your personal statement at all. Like the neuroscience girl did not at all. And that's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
That's really long. Sorry, guys. I know we should probably wrap up, huh?
Yeah, we'll answer maybe a couple more and then we'll have to let you guys go. But we do have more events coming up, including an entire session just to answering questions and ask us anything kind of thing that we will be doing in a couple months. But then we also have tons of webinars coming up about like admissions and scholarships and lots of other great stuff. And based on the success of this, maybe another personal statement one we'll have to see. So anyway, we'll talk about the YouTube channel. So just talking about my YouTube channel, in spite of the low views, make a good statement about my passion for video editing. I mean, it definitely could be, because it's all about perseverance. I wouldn't have all 650 words just be about your passion for video editing, but like definitely about like your evolution of the journey, maybe connecting that that desire and like the creativity maybe that you use in different aspects of your life. But I think that it doesn't really matter if you've got 10 million subscribers or like 10 or 0 subscribers. Like, it doesn't really matter. It's all about like what you've learned from it and how you're showing what you've learned from it as well.
From a young age, I've always valued, the emotion behind a good story. There's your hook.
Yes.
Go into it and take it from the lens of video editing. And I see someone said, thank you so much. This is by far the best seminar I've ever attended. I'll definitely be looking into your website. Just so you know, if all of this just comes from just a little, like, you sending in a couple questions, we 1 hour with us and your essay will be gold, okay? Like, just give us a few minutes with us, and I promise you your essay will look fantastic, and we hope to hear from you so much. So
yes. Did you have another one you wanted to answer, Michaela?
I don't think so. I saw one about computer graphics animator and a computer generated imagery artist, an independent and leading Egyptian full engineering consultant firm. Could this be an interesting topic? Yeah. Okay. So what I would do that, I had a student who did a computer science. He did a app building internship, and his essay started off with like weaving in elements of like how he would design something. So like he started off kind of describing how he would build an app. It was almost like a mathematic equation, and then like he followed that structure throughout, but like he kind of like he let that like structure his essay, but then he had like he talked about himself and his own character too. So like I think it started off more of like a math equation, and then he talked about his internship later, but it was like, 2 + 2 is always 4. That's a mathematical what's it called, like statement, concept, something that I can always come back to. Something like that I can always come back to. The same goes for blank 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 in computer science, and then maybe talking about how he builds like graphics, and so you can do it in like a creative way. But no, I think if you've worked in like computer graphics and you've worked in animation, like I think it's a super interesting topic. Just find an angle on it. Again, like sign up for a session with us and tell us more about it, and we'll help you come up with something. I promise it'll sound great. But I think that's a really cool job. Definitely talk about it. I'd love to hear about it as an admissions counselor. Like,
Perfect. All right, let's do one last one, and then this will be the last one. So I don't know about my career I want to go into, which is fine, but I do know my major, which is also fine if you didn't know it, but if you do know it, great. And I want to work with kids. So could I connect my story to my current working with kids and how I aspire to be doing so in the future? Yeah, that could be totally something you could do. And also kind of think, though, maybe that'd be better, though, for a Y major. Kind of think about it, look at your colleges, see about the supplementals. But, it could definitely be a good personal statement topic if you have something different to say for, like, the why this major, even if you're not positive about what your major might be. So kind of always thinking about the future, as Michaela talked about at length at the beginning, thinking, road mapping your answers to the right thing. But this, definitely could be a good topic for sure, because we're seeing it in maybe different aspects. If you want to work with kids, if you can tell us like kind of specifics about the impact you've had on other ones, like where your passion is, why you're passionate, I think that could be really great. But yeah, ultimately just remember to always kind of keep that roadmap in mind, thinking about the future, making sure that you always have something new to say. And to that end too, that's why those brainstorming questions are really helpful. And I'll resend them all to everyone in the emails. You can definitely reach out to us on our website. And if you want to take advantage of that $199 offer, it does expire on Friday, the 14th. So just kind of be aware of that, that this is kind of a limited deal to our lovely attendees at our webinar. So you can just email us at, hello@MoonPrep, or reach out to us at moonprep.com and just mention you were on the webinar to get access to it, or to the email that I'll send you guys. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add, Michaela?
I have nothing. We really appreciate you guys joining us, and we hope to hear from some of you soon. We'd love to help with any essays you have, and we hope you have a great night. Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys for spending your Monday with us.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.